This is a national security story that could easily give you whiplash. Drones, or something, over Texas. Flights making last minute diversions. Political intrigue in the White House. However, the story connects to a bunch of running themes on this channel, illustrates a collective problem that allies on both sides of the Atlantic are currently facing, and gives me the opportunity to cover some cool developments on how strategists at the highest of levels are trying to solve these problems. So bear with me as we push past some of the bizarre aspects of what just happened along the Mexican border and get to the more serious threats that are still present. The story begins at 11:30 p.m. on Tuesday night. Without warning, the Federal Aviation Administration shut down El Paso International Airport. No flights in or out, and you could only be in the airspace if you were above 18,000 feet, which immediately suggested that the problem was drone-related. This was a big deal. On the national level, there has not been a shutdown like this since 2001. On the local level, El Paso is the 22nd largest city in the United States. It is situated at the very west end of Texas, right across the border from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. Remember that for later. The announcement came in the form of a cryptic post on the Federal Aviation Administration's website. The government may use deadly force against an airborne aircraft violating the ban if it poses an imminent security threat. Moreover, the ban was set to last 10 days, suggesting the possibility that intelligence had picked up on a lingering threat. And it is not like there is any shortage of them. Iran might not want to be pulling the trigger first, but perhaps it had something set up and ready to go if the United States might start bombing within that 10-day window. Maybe Maduro loyalists want revenge for the special extraction operation in January, and El Paso provides a convenient target. Or maybe the Kremlin is feeling extra spicy and wants to gamble with a warning shot, especially one that has plausible deniability. But then, just as everyone was waking up on the East Coast trying to sort out what happened overnight, the FAA lifted the ban. This is where things start to get messy. The initial word came from a White House source that Mexican drug cartels had breached the border with multiple drones. These posed a danger to any planes in the region, necessitating the shutdown. Furthermore, Fort Bliss fired some type of anti-drone systems to disable the cartel threat. Fort Bliss is directly west of El Paso International Airport, and so the activity posed further risks to any civilian planes traveling in the area. That said, a more complicated story has since emerged involving interagency conflict at an awful time for the White House. By this account, in January, the Pentagon loaned a high-energy laser to Customs and Border Patrol, which then intended to use it as a counter-drone weapon. In the last week, the CBP began experimenting with it, apparently shooting down what ultimately was a Mylar balloon. The FAA feared that unplanned testing of the laser could cause issues for planes in El Paso, and thus instituted the flight restriction. The timing is bad for the White House because the Department of Homeland Security's funding runs out tomorrow. Congress is using its power of the purse to draft new restrictions for ICE activity. CBP falls under DHS, sorry for the alphabet soup, and you can imagine that Congress is curious to understand more about what happened here. The whole thing feels like we are in a fog of war situation, even though there should be some clear answers here. Now, I cannot provide direct answers to the current mystery. However, I can speak more about the general problem that the Pentagon/CBP agreement was trying to solve, because it is a critical one, even if the implementation here was a mess. And it provides a segue to begin discussing where we might find some better answers. Indeed, this is a story that Europeans should be familiar with. If we wanted to, we could travel across the entire continent with a bunch of specific cases. But let's stick to one: the airport in Vilnius, Lithuania. Unlike a lot of the other drone situations in Europe that might have more nefarious intent, this one appears to be silly by comparison. The airport often gets shut down due to large balloons flying overhead. As far as we can tell, these balloons carry contraband cigarettes from Belarus into Lithuania, and the criminal recipients then transfer money to the enterprising individuals back in Belarus. They are not literal trial balloons coming from the Kremlin, though they present a problem all the same because one day maybe they will be trial balloons, much like how the Russian decoy drones that ventured past Ukraine and into Poland on September 12, 2025, were very much a threat. Actually, Europeans know this problem all too well. The 2025 European Drone Sightings Wikipedia page has a humorous 17 subsections. The US border has a similar problem with the saturation of drones. As of 2 years ago, DHS warned that there were 27,000 incidents with drones within a half kilometer of the border. Not necessarily with violent intent in mind, but to surveil US Border Patrol and allow smugglers to make better tactical decisions. Again, though, the national security concern is that it would be very easy to camouflage some attack drones in with them and take a few potshots on soft targets. Whether we eventually learn that this was a case of Mylar balloons gone bananas, there is a general reason why commanders in the area are jumpy, and why CBP was interested in the lasers in the first place. None of this should come as a surprise. The general strategic problem became clear to the world following Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb attack back in June 2025. Relatively simple drones smuggled into Russia laid waste to potentially billions of dollars of Russian military aircraft. Moreover, in the aftermath, I warned specifically about the danger facing El Paso and its proximity to the border. There is no need for foreign adversaries to smuggle explosive-laden drones into the United States. Simply get them into Mexico, drive them close to the border, and let the quadcopters breach the border in midair. El Paso simply cannot continue like this. There are no reasonably sized airports anywhere nearby. San Antonio is way out to the east. Albuquerque is way up north. Tucson is way out west. For my European friends, El Paso's closest airport alternative is roughly the same distance as between Paris and London. Yeah, distances in the United States get vast, especially as you move further west. Had the shutdown lasted the full 10 days, about 1,000 flights would have been canceled. An El Paso city representative made a quick estimate that the damage would total $50 million. Oh, for those of you following all of the geopolitical crises at the moment, that is 64 quadrillion Iranian rials. But as I said last year in the aftermath of Spiderweb, the main problem here is not drug cartels doing whatever a bit too near or across the border. The main problem is the ease by which it is possible to breach the airspace without knowing who is responsible. In contrast to a bomb, fentanyl is a business product. A business product that may kill the end user, but a business product all the same. Meanwhile, a bomb's political intent is not obvious, even if the explosive part is obvious to everyone. The quadcopters coming across the border would likely not have business cards from Iran, Venezuela, Russia, or whomever to inform the target of who was responsible. And then that creates the incentive for, say, Russia to conduct the attack if the Kremlin thinks that there is a good chance that it will be misattributed to Iran or anyone else. It is a significant strategic wrinkle as compared to what is happening in Europe, where the only adversary on the radar is Russia. But the key thing here is that whatever happened in El Paso this time, the underlying problem is not about to go away, and it is going to get worse. Perhaps the only reassuring sign from it is that Fort Bliss apparently has been preparing for this moment, even if, again, the implementation this time around was poor. Thus, the questions for us turn to the long game. Part of the problem in El Paso was communication. To be generous, it was lacking here, both from the government to the public, and also between government agencies. The FAA seemed to be caught unaware of whatever the Pentagon and the CBP were up to, and then rushed into an opaque flight ban. And, moreover, a flight ban that threatened to shoot down what could be American aircraft. That led people like me to briefly think that this was a much more concerning proximate issue from a foreign adversary than what was the case. It is one thing to reroute air traffic briefly because of a current problem. It is another thing altogether to convince people that they should not be anywhere near a city for a prolonged period. And they need to find a solution. Both civilian and military airspace consumers must coexist. Usually they do so without issue, though sometimes that works better than other times. See the Reagan airport crash in January 2025 between an American Airlines flight and a Black Hawk helicopter as one of those other times. If there is any good news here, it is that at least this was a relatively benign situation. Better to have communication problems when the stakes are low, realize there is a problem, and then seek a fix before the real issue arises. However, the bigger problem remains developing the technology to properly intercept these kinds of drones at scale. And that extends far beyond the shores of the United States, and also includes Europe, where the problem feels far less hypothetical. Fortunately, that means a larger group of people are looking for solutions. And, ironically, they are back in Virginia. You'll remember this as the headquarters of NATO's Allied Command Transformation, or ACT for short. Recognizing the security risks from Operation Spiderweb last year, they set out to proactively work on solutions, even before the wave of drone incursions into NATO territory began.
Yes, this is a major problem. Product life cycles are 6 to 7 weeks. So we see new threats arise every 6 to 7 weeks, and that means that we have to formulate a new answer every 6 to 7 weeks.
That is Bart Hollins, the innovation broker over at Allied Command Transformation. He is one of the team members from the Layered Counter Unmanned Aircraft Systems Initiative, abbreviated to LCI-X. Indeed, Admiral Pierre Vendée, NATO Supreme Allied Commander Transformation, describes countering uncrewed threats as now being a defining challenge for the alliance. Back to Hollins.
I like that you mentioned Spiderweb, because that is also what these operations are based on. We want to train in real-world conditions, or as close to real-world conditions as possible. And for the activities in LCI-X, that means that we will be bringing opposing forces to the events. We will be simulating or executing attacks with red forces that we then ask allies and industry to counter. And so we're translating the lessons learned from Ukraine to what we can do with our tools in NATO, because there is a fundamental difference between what we can do and what the Ukrainians can do. We have different tools at our disposal, and we have a different command structure, and we want to exercise in that circumstance.
Well, speaking of exercising, the LCI-X initiative has a 4-phase execution plan. In the upcoming months, they will be testing how to counter unmanned systems. Then they will be recommending actual adoption procedures. Phase 1 in April aims to get the interception systems functional on a cell level. We have discussed this before in the context of NATO's innovation initiatives to improve interception rates of Russian Shaheds in Ukraine. Interceptors have a limited range. When a drone flies over, there is only a short window for it to fire off and hit its target. Back to the general problem. Phase 1 is about establishing an actual interception strategy. That requires getting, for example, an interceptor drone to effectively communicate with a radar system and a local command post to decide whether to intercept the potential threat. Think of this as a question about the basics. One target, one interceptor. Can you get it to work or not? Phase 2 in May pushes beyond a single interception cell to a network of cells. In practice, a true drone assault will have multiple potential targets and multiple potential interceptors, never mind a range of different interception technologies, including one's own drones, missiles, or high-energy weapons. The defender needs to triage the situation and determine which units are striking what, and often with only minutes to make those decisions. Think of this as the network question. Multiple targets, multiple interceptors. Can you coordinate everything or not? Phase 3 in August moves this to a theater-level question. NATO has a much larger command and control system that needs to look beyond just the drone question. Drones are a major concern, yes, but they are not about to override the rest of the alliance's systems. Consequently, think of this as the integration question. Can the new systems fit into the broader alliance network? The final phase in September tackles the dreaded I word, interoperability. NATO is an alliance of 32 members with 32 unique sets of systems, all prepared to fight under a unified command structure. Doing so successfully on the day that it matters requires practice ahead of time to ensure that Poland's systems, for example, can communicate effectively with Lithuania's. This is much less of a problem on the other side of the Atlantic, where drone threats almost certainly will not pass through multiple allied systems before reaching the United States. But over in continental Europe, where 29 allies share borders, it is an absolute necessity. A radar system in one country might detect a drone, but it may be better to hand off the interception to the next country in the line. Think of this as the classic NATO question. Can the sum of the alliance be greater than its parts? Because, again, the use cases are not intended to be limited.
The lessons learned from LCI-X are portable to other areas as well. So originally, we take lessons from Ukraine. We exercise those in real-world conditions on the eastern flank, but they can be ported to any border, right? I'd like to say that it's brewed in the eastern flank with ingredients from Ukraine. We bottle it in LCI-X, and then it can be drank wherever it's necessary. That also includes the U.S. border with Mexico.
Well, after the U.S. domestic coordination problem on Tuesday, it might help to have some proven interception systems on the ground. And I suppose that we might start getting some of that proof by the end of the summer. Thanks to Bart Hollins for talking over the issue with me. While we wait to see if the strategy is successful, you can watch some more videos on how NATO works by checking out this playlist. I promise you that I will say interoperability many, many more times over there. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.